We've got bowl games on. We've got Nebraska playing in a bowl game damn near next week. It's an exciting time in college football. The transfer portal is wide open, and every single team out there has hope, especially Nebraska fans. Man, if you guys saw the messages I get, and I'm not knocking anybody for sending the messages they do, but I get some pretty crazy questions. And questions, you know how it goes. Anyway, I get some pretty crazy questions regarding certain players that Nebraska might be able to add onto their roster, and they're just totally unrealistic. I feel like the bar has been set so high in Nebraska fans' heads, and the expectation has become so, we'll call it ridiculous, because of the money Nebraska can spend, that fans think that they'll be able to attract and, most importantly, be able to sign some of the top guys in the transfer portal. And the unfortunate truth, which we'll talk to Sam about here in a second, is that Nebraska has not won enough to beat out some of the top tier programs. And that's why we're sitting here still wondering who will be Nebraska's first big time commitment out of the portal. Obviously, Winery was big, but I'm talking about someone with proven production, specifically to help Dylan out, maybe on the offensive line or in the receiver room. We'll have to find out. But today, I want to talk about all that. I want to talk about the postseason. I want to talk about, the last couple weeks. And we as Nebraska fans, we look at it through a different lens. We have a different perspective than someone like Sam, who, although he follows along, isn't as diehard of a Nebraska fan as we are. So because he's not a diehard Nebraska fan, he can give us some realistic takes on the situation. We'll also talk about bowl games and anything else that we get asked in the chat today. So welcome. It's Christmas week. We're 7 days out from Christmas. I hope you guys are having a good holiday season. And yeah, with all that said, I'm going to bring my buddy Sam in. Which is my screen for you, Sam? There it is. What's happening? It's great for your channel. What's so interesting is I talk to people about this. They say, Connor, we look through rose-colored glasses when we're speaking about Nebraska, and all of our takes and commentary has to do with our manipulated perception of this team based on our fanhood. And I wouldn't say that you're not a Nebraska fan, because I truly believe you do like Nebraska football. I think you enjoy watching them. I think you're interested in the drama, the storylines, the tradition, the pageantry, all the things that I love about the team. I think you appreciate as well. So although you're a fan, you don't have any bias, because you're just as much of a fan of Nebraska as you may be a few other teams in the Big Ten. So the offseason kicked off, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? And there were a lot of portal hits, and then you had some coaching losses. And a lot of Nebraska fans tried to write it off. They said, well, their stats weren't that important, or they can get better in the portal, or those coaches weren't that big of a deal. I mean, for the most part, people were all in agreement to the coaches that they thought Matt Rhule would be able to replace them. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that. But I think the emphasis is on the players. Nebraska's a school who prides themselves on the brand, who prides themselves on right now having the money to go out and attract the best players in the country. And they haven't been able to do it so far, and they've lost a lot of guys in this process. So what's your take on all of the losses? Were there any of them where you thought, that one made sense because they weren't really a fit in the scheme? Were there any guys who you thought, well, that one had to go because they were going to go and poach someone else from another team? Or were there some losses that you think could hurt Nebraska going into 2025? Oh, shoot. Sorry, Sam. I wasn't even reading the chat, and they can't hear you. I don't have your audio linked, apparently. Give me 1 second. I apologize, chat. I didn't read the chat yet because I had some other things pulled up. Okay, give me 1 second, Sam. Properties. Why are you not linked? Test. Sam, talk. Nope, I don't have you now. I had you before we started the show. I did a test. I don't know what's happened in the last minute. I'm sorry, chat. Give me 1 minute. System. Talk? No. He said go big red. I love you. Thank you, Sam. Give me 1 sec. Talk? Can you guys hear Sam? Can you guys hear Sam now? Chat's got to let me know if they can hear you from here. It's weird that my... Let's see. Sam basically all he said was Nebraska's going to win a natty. Keep talking, Sam. I want to see if anyone talks in the chat and tells us they can hear you. Test, test, test. Damn. So all my stuff says you're linked, Sam? Okay, they can't hear him. All right, give me 1 sec, guys. I apologize for this. I did a test before the show and we were all good to go. That's frustrating. Audio output capture. I got you linked there. Discord. I've got you linked there. Properties. Test. Talk, Sam.
Hey, guys.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Everyone's saying nope, 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 nope. Now I want to see some yeses. I'm hoping that we see some yeses after this.
I'm hoping so too, because I want to talk about Nebraska going to a bowl game. But more importantly,
Connor says this is Nebraska football in a nutshell, LOL. I think he's talking about how it's a total mess. Okay. They said yes, they can hear. Thank God. I apologize, chat. Okay, let me get back to my question, Sam. We're going to start from the beginning.
That's all right.
I can't believe we had such a technical difficulty. My question to you was, are the Nebraska transfer portal losses as big of a deal as Nebraska fans are making them seem? Are they not a big deal? Do you think these are guys that they can replace? What's your take on the entire situation?
I don't think a ton of impact players are transferring out, like with the exception of maybe James Williams, but even then he was more of a depth piece behind guys in front of him. I think the bigger concern is depth, and if said depth can be replaced, whether that is through development of the players that have been recruited to Nebraska in previous classes, or whether they can get the required volume and production from the portal. Because like Emmett Johnson, for example, thankfully he came back, and that's good. You'd rather have him, I think, at RB1 than Dowdell at RB1. But who's behind him? Because if he gets injured, or because the running back position typically takes a lot of wear and tear, you got to have someone behind him. And that's kind of my view, is you can't view these losses as nothing, because depth means a whole lot. The best programs, or programs that, are top 25, they have depth. But also, it's not like the sky is falling. I mean, Nebraska is reaching a bowl game for the first time since the end of the Obama presidency. That was 3 presidencies ago.
Right.
And they also have, you didn't lose Dylan Raiola to the portal. You didn't lose Thomas Fidone. You lost Nate Borkacher. You lost James Williams. But if the starters had eligibility and some of them decided to return on the D line, they probably wouldn't have left. So I view it as a lot of guys who probably think, I can do better at another school that maybe can win more games, or I can experience more winning in their thought process. Not saying it's correct.
Yep.
They think they can experience more winning somewhere else and start where they're stuck here, kind of in a backup or secondary role, like Borkacher or Williams, or Malachi Coleman.
Let's go through the list. We'll talk about a few of the players specifically. Really quick, I want to address the comments that came in so far that were super chats. Myth, thank you for the super chat, letting me know this. Doug, thank you as well. I'm sorry for not reading the chat. Because I messed this up, by the way, I'm going to send merch to 5 people. So to get merch, just after this video's done, leave a comment on it, and I'll pick 5 people, and I'll send you guys merch this week. That's my apology for wasting your guys' time in the first 5 minutes of this video, or whatever that was. Again, thank you for the super chats and trying to let me know. So really quick, Sam, let's go back to some of the players specifically, right? You talk about Dowdell. Dowdell is a questionable loss because it could go 2 ways. Was Dowdell a loss that Nebraska could afford? Was it a loss that they, I don't want to say wanted, but a loss where you're like, well, Dana Holgerson comes in and they've got to run a different style of offense and Dowdell might not play as much. Is it worth keeping him and paying him what it would cost? Or is it worth going out and getting someone different? Or did Michigan come in? That's the rumor. I've gotten a lot of messages from different people who I
Oh, I,
trust. And
I
I
hate that.
heard that Michigan came in and offered a lot of money. I don't know, people say crazy numbers. I saw 400,000 in my DMs. But if Michigan came in and offered him, 400 grand, really quick, let's just see where he ranks. Let's just check it before I get your response to this. So these are the running backs in the portal right now. Dowdell, by 24/7 standard, is ranked number 6 nationally in the portal, okay? Some of the running backs in the conversation with him are Roman Hemby, extremely productive multi-year starter from Maryland. Quentin Joyner, not that productive, but extremely high ceiling. Could be a starter at multiple Big Ten schools. It would have been the starter at USC this year. Just didn't get enough love from Lincoln Riley. Ahmad Hardy, I'm not sure where he's going to end up, but he's a little bit higher than Dowdell. He's way more productive. I think he might have been a 1,000-yard running back. But my point in saying this is, if you're Nebraska and you want to go and get a running back, who are you going to get that's ranked as high or has been as productive as a guy like Dowdell, right? People were talking about Kawan Lacey. Well, dude's gone to Ole Miss already. So, yeah, just let's talk about Dowdell. What's your take on that, and where do you think things are going from there?
I could be wrong, but if Michigan's paying him that much money, I don't have, from a Michigan fan standpoint, a lot of optimism about the running back situation. Like if they bring in someone else and he's the secondary option, that's beautiful. But we know from his time at Nebraska, he's more of an up and down running back, power back. And yeah, my take on it is I think that Nebraska can find someone who is as good as him for probably the same or less than what he was asking for. Like I think Roman Hemby would be an upgrade if, let's say, Nebraska got him
100%.
in the running back
Dude,
group.
Roman Hemby, just so people know who Roman Hemby is, let me just pull up his stats really quick. So
He's
Roman
a
Hemby
beast.
was a receiving, I mean, he was like he was very similar to Emmett Johnson. Like he was a receiving back. He wasn't used all the time. They had another guy who was more of a Dowdell kind of guy, right? But he could come to Nebraska and be an instant, would you call him a role player? Because Emmett Johnson would probably be the starter.
Yeah, but Hemby
Wait,
was a
pause.
starter
I'm going to
at
share the
Maryland.
screen and I'm going to link you here because I don't think you're linked properly here. I got to go back to my audio. Link you on this one. Headphones. Talk. Okay, you should be good. Yeah, you're good. Okay, so right here, you've got Hemby, right? The last 4 years at Maryland, 3 years starter, 989 yards rushing, 300 receiving, 680 rushing, almost 400 receiving. And then this last year, 607 and 273. So he's similar to what they want to do in terms of running back play with Emmett Johnson, but he'd be a great complement in the offense, I think is kind of the point. Yeah. Well, if they get a running back in the portal, I just don't know if it's someone who's already in the portal yet, right? I don't know that they're going to have a chance at some of these guys who are up higher. I don't know if they're even interested in going after a Roman Hemby. They've been very focused on the line. They've been very focused at receiver. Let's talk about receivers as well. It says Sam's muted. Damn, I don't know why one thing works and one thing doesn't. We're going back to this, Sam. Sam didn't say much outside of follow up with what I said just now anyway. So we're going to stick here because I broke YouTube apparently. Okay, Sam, let's go to the receiver room. So Nebraska is going to have to replace multiple guys, right? You've got your starting Z and your starting X. They don't have anyone who's a proven player at either of those two positions. You look at the portal and people are talking about Zach Branch. They're talking about Deuce Robinson. They're talking about Dane Key. And those are all, I just think, unrealistic hopes, right? When you talk about Zach Branch and Deuce Robinson, they're top 5 receivers. Even Dane Key is a top 5 receiver by most people's standards in the portal. So if Nebraska can't go out and get one of those guys, but they do end up with somebody like, who was it they were looking at? Isaiah Hunter from Cal. Do you think that they're going to just have to wait until more guys enter later in the cycle? Or do you think that they're going to go and drop down to get an FCS guy or drop down to get an unproven guy?
I mean, I think they'll have to get something in regards with depth, but they obviously upgraded at wide receivers coach. I think if they get some bodies there, the receiver room could upgrade. What you said about them spending on the O line, I really like, and I do agree that Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch would be unrealistic, but you have Dane Key's receiver coach, so there is a connection there.
Well,
Thankfully, he would
just
be
I don't want you to sell people on Dane Key
okay.
because I'm extremely convinced that he is going to the SEC schools. He's going to
That
either
makes
like
sense.
Georgia or somewhere good, like Ole Miss. I don't think he's going to leave to come to Nebraska where he can't win a championship right away. So I think Dane Key's off the table, and people are so excited about other guys like what's his name? Zach Branch. But Zach Branch had a do not contact tag when he entered the portal. Right away, that tells me one thing. Zach Branch was tampered with, and he already knows where he's going, right?
Yep, exactly.
Bill, that's my response to this question when you talked about Danke. So I hope that cleared it up. Small Toe says he's scared that Branch will go to Colorado. I think as long as his Branch doesn't go to a school that Nebraska has to play, I don't care where he goes. The only frustrating part is that Nebraska would like to have a guy like him. But at the same time, is Zach Branch really a guy who Nebraska needs? They already have Ja'Cory Barney, and I think they have very similar skill sets. You probably wouldn't need to get a Zach Branch when you've already got Ja'Cory. I think Nebraska needs to be extremely productive in the portal at the right spots in the areas of need, right? And not just go out and get players who they think that can come in and play whatever roles. They only have so many guys they can add to this roster because they're still working with a roster constraint. So if you're going to go after a few, you have to make sure they fit in with what you're already doing. So maybe a Zach Branch isn't someone that Nebraska needs, although fans would like to have him. So let's talk about some of the top portal classes in the Big Ten, Sam. And I'm not going to share my screen because I'm not about to screw up the audio. I've already screwed this video up enough. But you've got in the Big Ten right now, Minnesota with the 6th ranked transfer portal class. Wisconsin has the 9th ranked transfer portal class. Michigan State has the 11th. And then UCLA has the 18th. Do you think the future in the Big Ten, at least next season, we're going to see a lot of transfer guys who were bigger names coming in and playing how Colorado had, right? Playing roles where they came from a school where, let's say they were at Georgia and they were getting a little bit of playing time, like an MJ Sherman, and now they come and light it up in the Big Ten because they're the school that, had a little bit more room for them? Or do you think that most of the Big Ten teams aren't looking to rebuild at the same level Nebraska is going to have to on one side of the ball, and these are just supplemental players?
I think for Wisconsin, for example, it very much depends. Wisconsin's in a very much win now or go home situation. That's why they're loading up. I think Minnesota is loading up because they want to win more than 7 or 8 games per season. They should bring a lot back next year. I made a video about it. They have over 10 portal commits. A lot of them are FCS guys, but they're loading up their running back room. I mean, they brought back Darius Taylor and got Marshall starting running back who averaged 8 yards per carry. Yeah. So I think for a school like Minnesota and for a lot of Big Ten schools, the Colorado strategy might actually work because you don't have the expectations of winning, 10 games every year or, winning the Big Ten or national title. So you can work with the busts because they're expected. And then the booms are just added, dessert. Like it's a win-win situation, I think, for Minnesota and maybe even for Wisconsin because their schedule next year is super tough. So they have to invest. And it's the same for Michigan State and, UCLA. I notice a lot of the teams at the top, I feel like, are in a win now area where the teams in the middle and bottom are either being more selective or they're comfortable with what they have.
Well, let's talk about Nebraska specifically, okay? So, man, the expectations have shifted so dramatically, right? Before the season, I don't know where you stand on this, you can fill in, but before the season said if Nebraska does not win 7 games, at least, they probably needed to win 8, but if they didn't win 7 games, that I would look at the 2024 football season as an absolute failure and a disaster, and it could lead to serious problems down the road. I am of the belief that it did lead to a little bit of a disaster. You had a lot of players leave who Nebraska would like to have kept. You had Dylan Raiola potentially flirting with other schools in the SEC. There was a lot of talk about that. And obviously, they were throwing a lot of money his way to try and get him to come over there to Georgia, A&M, whoever else wanted him. Fortunately, he stayed. That was awesome. But my point is, there was a lot of blowback after you didn't hit the goals. And I think Nebraska fans are now feeling like, well, is this Matt Rule's kind of last chance? You know, how long does he get? How long is the leash? Is he allowed to win 6 games next year and not be punished for it? Is he allowed to go 7-5 next season and lose? I mean, I'm of the belief that Dylan Raiola would be gone next year if they didn't win at least 8 or 9 games. That's just, I think Nebraska has to be on a path to a championship or he'll be out. But what's your kind of take on that? What do you think Nebraska had to do this season? Did they meet your expectations? And then what's your thought on going forward?
They, I was in lockstep with you, I think, in the beginning of the year where I thought, 7, 8 wins. I thought that at least having a winning regular season would be a success because they just hadn't had that in so long. And while the schedule was easy, you had Ohio State, you had USC and Iowa on the road. It was, I wouldn't call it a catastrophic failure because at least they went bowling, but it was a disappointment for me because there were a lot of games that were winnable. And if you look at how the season played out, there were pathways to win every game except for the Indiana game. And there were not many pathways to lose games that Nebraska ended up winning. So once again, the whole one score thing wasn't going in Nebraska's favor for much of the year outside of, let's say, Rutgers, for example. And I think that the losses in the portal, the fact that the defense didn't play at the level that I thought it was going to, and the team was up and down for a large part of the year. And last, but I think most importantly, Dylan Raiola played well at times, but I don't know. There was just something off there, and I'm hoping it was Marcus Satterfield, and I'm hoping Dana Holgerson can fix that because toward the middle and end of the year, if that continues, he is going to leave because
here's a comment that I actually want you to respond to really quick because this one is one that a lot of people have been talking about, and I agree with all your takes, what you said so far, right? But let's hone in on the Raiola conversation. What is this? I don't know how to say his name. Raiola is not good enough. I understand he's a true freshman, but I see the upside in DJ Lagway that I don't see in Raiola. Give me a response to that.
My response to that is upside here is probably a euphemism for mobility. When we think of upside and athleticism, we think of dual threat quarterbacks. And that's what the future and honestly the present and recent past has been. Dual threat QBs who can run consistently and extend plays with the legs behind the line of scrimmage. They succeed. They're likable. And while Raiola can do that sometimes, he's kind of more of a pro style guy. And it kind of looks like Aller did last year when Aller tried to run, where he's like awkward and, just awkward with it. Now, Aller, he doesn't run a lot, but he looks a lot more comfortable taking off with improvised scrambling. So that might be something Raiola can fix. Or at least add to his skill set, maybe is the more appropriate
that's a great way to spin this because, first off, I do see the upside in Raiola that I also see in DJ Lagway. But you twisting it and saying, well, he's talking about upside in terms of running ability and athleticism. Okay, that makes sense. Here's the thing. Stats don't tell the entire story. Raiola didn't have an amazing season, but he did have a really good season for a true freshman. He had some misses, threw some interceptions. I mean, he had crucial misses, right? He had like 6 or 7 balls that if those would have been thrown on the money, Nebraska would be 2 or 3 more wins at this point, right? So he's in a learning phase of his game as a true freshman coming into the Big Ten, being thrown into the fire. Not many guys even get that opportunity to go to a Big Ten school that you're trying to build back and then get thrown into it, right? Usually if you're going to do that, you're going to a better school like Clemson when Trevor Lawrence did it, right? He had a really good supporting cast around him. So I'm not throwing rocks on Dylan Raiola. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. He has a ton of upside. He's super freaking smart. And yeah, he had the accuracy issues, but he's going to get better. So I just think
his receivers
growth. Receivers weren't the best either.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of his interceptions weren't there like 2 or 3 where the DB just took it out of the receiver's hand?
There were at least 2 where the receivers gave the ball away. Yeah, they could have pulled it down. They didn't do it. Here's a question from Lunar Vibes. He's asked a few times, and I didn't answer it yet. He said, do you think we're screwed for the bowl game because of all the players we're losing in the portal? I'll answer it first. I don't think that the players Nebraska's losing in the portal are going to make that much of a difference in the bowl game. I do think it changes how the bowl game's going to look because Nebraska's not going to have the depth pieces. So you're going to see some names that you've probably never seen before come onto that field. You're going to see some really young guys step in and play more significant snaps than they probably would have had to. But when we're talking about just the starters in the front line going into it, let's say Banks and Nayor don't opt out, since we haven't heard anything about that, right? Well, the offense is pretty intact. You won't have Dowdell, but Emmett Johnson's going to play probably 60% of the snaps anyway. Ramir Johnson's a stud back who I think Nebraska would love to utilize more in this game, and they're going to have the opportunity to. You flip over to the defense. Nebraska's not going to have a starting linebacker in Mekhi Bayer. They're not going to have their starting defensive end in Jamari Butler. They're not going to have another starting defensive end in James Williams, who's, he's off the bench, but he's still, in my opinion, he was a starter. So you also have a backup jack in Prince Will, who won't be playing. But I don't think that the portal decimated Nebraska in terms of bowl game experience and situation. I think they're going to go there. They're going to play a perfectly fine game. It's all about the offense anyway. The defense should be fine. They're playing a Boston College team who I'd say is good, but not great by any means. And when you talk about an athletic comparison, Nebraska's got more athletes on their team. They're faster, they're bigger, they're stronger. The coaching edge, I don't know if you give it to either side. I think they both have good coaches, and I'd probably lean taking Holgerson in this game as the coach. So what do you think, Sam? Is this portal news and all the negativity around Nebraska over the last couple of weeks going to affect them in a week?
I don't think they're screwed for the bowl game because from what I understand, a lot of the starters are playing in the bowl game because it's, their first bowl game. And for many of them, their only bowl game at Nebraska. It's special. They should treat it like a playoff game. And I think many of them will. What I think, if there is any of Nebraska being screwed going on here, and we'll see if that's going to happen, that's for 2025. That's not for the bowl game. I think that Nebraska should beat Boston College. I think that the coaching is pretty equal, like you said, and yeah, I don't think the problems relating to the portal are going to have much of an effect or much of a hand in the bowl game. I don't think that at all.
I think that's fair. I want to answer a couple questions just so people know what's going on. Pretty Sarah, thank you for being a member. She says, can players we get from the portal play in the bowl game, or are they not allowed to till next year? They are not allowed to. But players who come in through the portal and players who come in from high school can practice with the team. So I don't think any of the players who come in from the portal will practice with the team, but I think they'd be allowed to if they wanted to. Jackal says, am I crazy to say that we've been a bit disappointing in the portal so far? We're seeing Texas Tech go crazy right now. So no, it's not crazy to say that it's been a disappointing portal season so far because Nebraska's only added a few guys, but they have added key positions. They added a depth piece with a defensive end from the FCS. I don't think he'll be an instant impact starter. I'm not sure how good he really is. I'm not sure if he's a guy they'll develop, but he will provide depth. What was it? The long snapper came in from New Hampshire. That was a great addition. They needed that. Long snapper cost Nebraska at least one, if not two games this year. And then they added a punter, and they needed to add a punter since they lost Buschini. So far, they have addressed some needs, but they haven't made any splash, not hires, but they haven't made any splash additions like a receiver, an offensive lineman, or anything like that because, some of these teams that they're trying to recruit against, they got to go and visit them as well, and they're really attractive packages that they're being presented. So when you're going up against the Oregons, Texas A&Ms, the Auburns, the Georgias, the Alabamas, Ohio States, and whoever else wants these good players, the odds that Nebraska is going to land that many are extremely thin to begin with, but then add in the fact that these guys don't have to make a decision right away, and it just feels like there's a long wait. So you talk about guys or schools like Colorado and Texas A&M, or whoever's a winning team right now, Oregon. You see them go out and get a 5-star guy immediately or a former player who's a stud. But they're doing it for two reasons. One, they're coming with the biggest bag. But two, and more importantly, what Nebraska cannot offer is recent success and a path to getting to a championship game. A lot of the players who enter want that opportunity. They come from schools who aren't very good. Thieneman from Purdue. top safety in the portal. It's kind of like a Caleb Downs from last year when he transferred from Alabama to Ohio State. I'm sure he got paid some crazy amount of money to go to Oregon, but not just being in a scheme where he thinks he's a fit and being at a school who can pay him the most. He is going to be he's going to be on a path to play for a championship, and that's something that he would have never seen if he stayed at Purdue. So I think there are a lot of schools like that can offer more than Nebraska in that regard. What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of what I agree with. Also, for the context of when you were talking, I just looked up Texas Tech's portal class because I was intrigued. They're getting Mitch Griffiths, or I think that's how you say his name, from Wake Forest, their quarterback. I think Nebraska's playing in a bigger pond, in a better pond than what Texas Tech is playing in.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Texas Tech Common, I think, they are ranked number 2 in portal commitments right now. And all their outside of, I think they got the guy from UCF, the defensive tackle, who's pretty good.
Yep.
Outside of him, they didn't land anybody who's a huge name. So they're ranked extremely high in the portal because they're adding so many, not because they're getting superstar players. They got the Purdue corner, Terrion Grant, who I didn't think was all that great when Nebraska played against him. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting because these portal rankings are skewed based on volume sometimes, not just based on power players.
Exactly.
And we might think one thing about a team, and that might be the wrong way to look at it. Another comment from Gerald. He says Colorado's going crazy in the portal. Colorado is, but Colorado, like these other teams, has recent success. They almost made the Big 12 championship this year. They had a Heisman winner this year, and undisputed, in my opinion, Heisman winner. It's ridiculous that people, to me, say Genty should have won. Travis Hunter is the best football player out there. But yeah, it's a really tough time to be a Nebraska fan watching other schools succeed in the portal and having our team, not do much of anything yet. But things will change. I'm confident in it, and I'm sure Sam has the same belief. Dakota, thank you for being a member. Thank you for the $5 super chat. What underdog is most likely to win the college football playoff this weekend? I'll let you go first, Sam.
Indiana. That's who.
Tell me why.
It's because Notre Dame is a lot like Michigan teams I've watched in the past before the national title team, the teams that were awesome at running the ball, but had weaknesses on defense, and they couldn't pass the ball all that well consistently. And while Indiana does have some weaknesses, their D-line and rushing defense is not one of those. And I think they have a better coaching staff. So those things combined with it being, an in-state game, the stadium will probably be closer to 50-50 than very lopsided, knowing how excited Indiana fans are. And for these big games, Notre Dame Stadium is typically occupied by a certain degree to opposing fan bases. I think it'll be a close game, and I think Indiana can pull it off. I mean, they've had 3 weeks to prepare, and they have a really good coaching staff. It'll be different for Indiana, the amount of time they have to prepare for Notre Dame, than let's say they win that game and then they only have a week and a half to prepare for Georgia. Like, it's just a different circumstance.
Who has a better chance at the upset? Tennessee. I'm going to say my pick, if I'm not saying Indiana, I would go with Tennessee to beat Ohio State. I just don't trust Ohio State. I think Tennessee has a really strong run game. I think there's a chance they could come out there and play really well. But who do you think has a better chance? Tennessee or SMU?
I would slightly lean Tennessee because I think even with Franklin being incompetent in big games, Penn State's talent advantage is massive. And right now, I think Penn State's a slightly better team than Ohio State because of Ohio State's O-line injuries. And Tennessee's better than SMU.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm still going to go with Tennessee. I like Indiana this week. I'm taking Indiana. But it'll be tough for them to pull that upset, I'll tell you that.
Yes, it will.
I had a couple questions I wanted to respond to. Max, I'm going to respond to this in just 1 minute. He wants to go over some of the quarterbacks that Holgerson's had. I'll go over that in 1 minute. I actually pulled them up for you. Sarah says, what do we think about the Foley returning rumors? Foley is returning. If Foley wasn't going to return, he'd be gone, right? Foley's coming back. He's in recruiting pictures. They haven't talked about making any changes. Yeah, I think Foley's staying. Let's see. Brett says Texas Tech has a former player who just became a billionaire through oil. That's why you see them doing what they're doing. Nebraska doesn't have that, unfortunately. That's true as well. Nebraska has money, but they don't got unlimited money. Price says Patrick Payton is in. I think Patrick Payton's Ohio State or Georgia. What do you think, Sam? Or Oregon?
If I were Patrick Payton, I would choose Oregon, Penn State, or Michigan over OSU in terms of development. Yeah. OSU's had a lot more talent coming in on the D line, but those three schools have developed way better, especially at edge.
See, but this is a prime example, Sam. And Bryce, this isn't a knock on you at all. I'm not saying anything bad about Nebraska fans either in this. But going back to the beginning of my video when I was talking about how Nebraska fans get excited and they see a big name come into the portal. And I'm not saying that you're doing this. You're probably just trolling Bryce. But Nebraska fans do believe that they have a chance at some of these big name guys. And I just don't think they do. Like, I truly don't believe this season, that after this season, that Nebraska has a chance to land top 5 players in the portal. Now, Williams-Nwaneri, that was different, totally unproven. In my opinion, he was leaving a Missouri situation that I don't even know how bad they wanted to keep him. They probably wanted to keep him, but he's pretty expensive on their payroll. So did they see enough out of him to say, yeah, he's not worth what we're spending, right? So Williams-Nwaneri, good pickup, not an elite pickup. Patrick Payton would be an elite one, and Nebraska's not in position to fight for elite players right now. Now, Mozilla has a comment that I do think we can transition into. Thank you for being a member, by the way. He says, Ole Miss is bringing in tons of people also. Now, you're familiar with Ole Miss, with Lane Kiffin, with the money they've been spending, and with their portal additions over the last couple of years. Ole Miss has money. They have a hot coach. They have a hot brand. And what do they have most? A winning program who almost made the college football playoff this year. So that's a team who Nebraska could be like in the future, right? If they can win, they can, kind of repeat that cycle that Ole Miss does. The difference is Ole Miss builds their whole team in the portal. How many guys they had last year? Like 20 or something? I mean, most of their star players, they had 3 All-Americans this year. One was a linebacker, don't know where he came from. One was a defensive tackle, and one was a defensive end. The defensive tackle and the defensive end, first team and second team All-American, were both transfers from other SEC schools, right? So,
and they still missed the playoff.
And they still missed the playoff. They just screwed that up. It was Jackson Dart's fault. I love Jackson Dart, by the way, but that guy screwed that up. His stupid passes at the end of that Florida game messed him up. That is a game where you can point to one player and say he messed up that game.
Oh, the Kentucky loss, too. I thought that was the funniest thing when that happened, too. Like, 4-8 Kentucky in hindsight. I do think that, to say what you said, Ole Miss, yeah. Eventually, if Nebraska keeps winning and they get hot, they can start doing some of those moves to a certain degree. But you also, to circle back to my earlier comment, you do want to be better than Ole Miss because Nebraska, Rule has said he wants to build out of high school. I think that's smart. Lower it raises your floor a little bit. And I also think that with the schedule Ole Miss had this year, you never ever want to miss the playoff with that talent and that schedule. So Ole Miss right now is just on a different level, in part because they hired their head coach in 2020. And they also have resources, but mostly they hired their head coach in 2020. You hired your coach in 2023. It's a different timetable.
That's 100%. I think that's something people have got to remember. Doug, I'm going to answer your super chat really quick. I want to go back to this because I said that I thought Hunter deserved the trophy over Genty. My opinion on this, I'd love to hear yours, is Hunter plays a position where it's harder to make game-changing impact than when you're playing running back. When you're playing running back, you're expected to have certain stats, certain yards if you're the number one guy on the team, if you're going to be a guy who gets the honor of Heisman Trophy, right? So I loved that Genty did what he did against inferior competition, in my opinion, and I love that he had amazing stats and was such a dominant force, and I think he was deserving to be in New York for that reason. But Travis Hunter, as a corner and as a receiver, changed multiple outcomes for his team. I remember in the Baylor game, they were losing. They were supposed to lose that game. They came back to win. Travis Hunter had a touchdown, I think a huge catch for a touchdown, then, or at least put them in position to score one. Then he had a goal line forced fumble that won them the game, where he hit the running back and the ball popped out. That's one that I remember specifically because I was like, oh my God, give him the Heisman now. He did that multiple times. And when you do that from an odd position, I feel like kind of like in Ndamukong Suh. When you do it from an odd position, it just shows how far and away better you are than other people who play that spot. And in his case, both those spots. Now, was he the number one receiver in America? Maybe not. Was he the number one corner in America? I think he was. But I think because he played both of those positions and because he was playing at such a high level on both sides of the ball, that's why I got to give him the Heisman Trophy. I think if Genty did what he did in the Big Ten, if he did what he did in the SEC, I would start to say, okay, well, maybe Genty deserves it. But playing inferior competition the way he did, I think knocked him a couple points for me. What do you think?
So I have been for a while, although my mind has changed a little bit recently. For a while, I kind of defended Genty as the argument for number one, mainly because of that Oregon game. I just couldn't, as the season went on and Oregon kept winning and their run defense got a little bit better, I couldn't get out of my mind, like, holy cow. Like, this guy doesn't have much of a supporting cast on offense.
Yeah.
And he's winning them all of their games. But I do understand people who support Travis Hunter because what he's doing on both sides of the ball, like, I don't think he's the number one receiver or number one corner, but he's an insane NFL prospect. He has a lot of endurance and he's good on both sides of the ball. And that's
and he makes game-changing plays. I think that's the key, right? He helped his team win. That's my take on it, guys. That's Sam's take on it. I know people love to argue about the Heisman stuff, but I just don't really think it matters. I see people argue online about the Heisman stuff, and I think it's just so stupid. My favorite is when people bring like race into it, which is the weirdest thing to me. I think that people have just gotten so weird and divisive online when talking about sports that I have to just tap out. So I don't read a bunch of the stuff I see. I just form my own opinions based on the games I watch, and I watch a lot of football, if you guys didn't already know. Doug says, what are both of your predictions on the playoffs? So I'll run through mine first really quick. I think that, well, let me pull up the bracket so I know what I'm doing. Hold on. College football playoff bracket. Everyone's got a square pick, in my opinion, for these playoffs. And I think it's kind of justified that they do. I think Ohio State wins and goes to play Oregon. And then I think Oregon wins that game. I think Texas is going to beat Clemson. And I think Arizona State's going to beat Texas. I think Oregon's going to beat Arizona State, and I think Oregon State will play for a national championship. I think Penn State is going to beat SMU. I think they're going to beat Boise. I think Notre Dame is going to run the table, and they're going to end up beating Penn State to face Oregon in the national championship. So Oregon, Notre Dame national championship is my prediction. What's yours?
Mine, I had to pull up my bracket too, is I have Texas beating Clemson and Arizona State to get to the semifinals. I have Ohio State beating Tennessee, but then Oregon winning the rematch in the Rose Bowl and facing Texas, and then Oregon beating Texas to advance to the national title game. I have Penn State beating SMU and Boise State to play in their semifinal. I have Indiana beating Notre Dame, but losing to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And this was tough for me. I actually might switch it when I do my bracket picks in a video, like tomorrow or something. But I do right now, just roster-wise, mainly, I do have Penn State slightly beating Georgia, and then moving on to the national championship game where I think Oregon wins. I think Oregon is head and shoulders above everyone right now.
Yeah, I think Oregon's the best team in the country, so I don't argue with that. Yep. Nav says, Tennessee man telling you, have a shot. Them and Indiana most likely upsets. I think they're obviously the most likely upsets at this point. Those are the two best matchups, and they're going to be the best games in my opinion. Whereas Clemson, Texas, and SMU, Penn State, those probably end up in 14+ point wins for the home team. So that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch. It'll be fun, but I'm guessing those are games that I won't have to watch for very long. It's really all about Indiana, and it's all about Tennessee. Ohio State. So we'll see. Jim, thank you for the 2579. He says 25 for Christmas and 79 for my new age. Merry Christmas to both you and Sam and your families. Well, thank you, Jim. Merry Christmas to you and happy birthday. I forgot. Jim told me it's his birthday today. So 79 years old. He's been a Nebraska fan for a long freaking time. I'll be up there one day soon with you. You're only 48 years older than I am. So I got some time to catch up to you, but I hope you're having a good birthday, and I'm glad that you could come on the stream today. And we got to say hi. Let's see. Sam says this money discrepancy is getting silly. Most of the top teams are spending 15 to 20 mil. Yeah, Sam, I think I've given my take on this before. I'm not sure if I have, if you've even heard it, but my take on this is they're going to have to implement a salary cap because if this game becomes a sport of billionaires, it will become unwatchable. If you have Larry Ellison, who, keep in mind, if you called me and said, hey, Connor, I have a charity thing and I need 2 pennies, what do you think I would do? I would give you the 2 pennies, right? Well, that's what Dave Portnoy and Larry Ellison's wife did. They said, Larry, we need 2 pennies, which is $12 million to him. And he said, yeah, do whatever you want to do. And so they threw $12 million at this quarterback. Now, let's say Mark Cuban says the same thing. And it's like, hey, Mark Cuban, I need 10 cents from you to fund Indiana's roster. And he's like, really, 10 cents? Yeah, take it, whatever. Do whatever you want with it. You're going to end up with this sport being paid for by billionaires. And I'm not sure that you have enough billionaires to make, a diverse playing field. I think you're going to have, what would it be? Texas A&M, Oregon, Ohio State. Who else? There's a few schools who have big name boosters. And then beyond that, you're screwed. Michigan. So you're screwed beyond 6 or 7 schools. And it just makes it not fun to watch anymore. So I think salary cap has to come, and it's going to come for that reason alone. What do you think?
I hope that's what happens. I think they have to implement salary caps, especially because the more inflation occurs in the college football market, the more disparity there is in different players being paid different things, and it'll just get out of control. And if you're getting paid $12 million as a quarterback, why will you listen to your QB position coach? Like you won't. Most 19-year-olds or 18-year-olds won't. There has to be, I feel like what the NCAA and college football did is they swung from one end of the extreme spectrum to the other. And now we have it's the wild, wild west. It's why Michigan, what Michigan's about to do in the portal, I mean, they only have 4 commits right now, but from what I hear, they're in it with all these big guys because of the donors they have. It's 100%. Been that way with Ohio State in the past. And Indiana, they have a really wealthy business school, a productive business school. So if they get in contact with someone, that could be interesting. Texas spent more than Ohio State did last year on their roster. So there has to be some type of order. And I think a salary cap would be very, very helpful.
Well, it will come, in my opinion. So, Sam, I'm not sure if you're paying attention to Twitter or the chat, but the chat just informed me of something. Eric Rivers commits to Georgia Tech. And I'm not going to lie to you. This is a freaking blow. I'll tell you why it's a blow. I think Eric Rivers would have been an instant impact receiver at Nebraska, and he would have replaced Isaiah Nayor in that Z spot or slot. Nayor plays Z or slot. I'm not sure which, but one of the two. And Georgia Tech beating Nebraska out is painful because it's Georgia Tech, right? Nebraska should be able to match the money, but the difference between Nebraska and Georgia Tech is Georgia Tech has a proven quarterback who got the ball to their leading receiver this year in Singleton, who ended up transferring out. And I'm sure he sees himself in a position where he can go and start there right away. So this is just my instant reaction to hearing this. I wish that Rivers would have gone to a good school because going to Georgia Tech is really frustrating as a Nebraska fan who was hoping he would come to our school. What do you think, Sam?
I think that Brent Key is one of the better head coaches in the country, and that if Georgia Tech had an easier schedule, they'd have more than 7 wins. I mean, they nearly got to, 8 or 9, nearly beat Georgia. And Haynes King is one of the best QBs in the nation when healthy. I mean, it's really simple. Like you said, they have a better quarterback. They had a better record this year. It's closer to home too. I mean, because he played at FIU, it's not as much of a distance. Yep. It's also a blow for Penn State. Penn State was wanting Eric Rivers too. So multiple Big Ten schools lost out.
I thought Penn State or Miami was going to get him, and it was Georgia Tech. Like, what the hell?
Well, good for them. I love Brent Key. I think that what he's doing there is phenomenal. I think they're going to be very good in the ACC.
Yep. Another one who just committed, which I knew this one was coming. The quarterback from Washington State, what's his name? Mateer commits to Oklahoma. I think this is awesome for Oklahoma. Oklahoma was so down bad this year, and they were such a joke trying to play, what's his name? Jackson Arnold.
Jackson Arnold.
And they deserve more. Oklahoma's one of those programs similar to a Nebraska where I want to see them be good. And for them to be a 6-win team this year was really painful to watch. So although they're a Nebraska rival, it's good for the sport when Oklahoma's good. You can tell me if you have the same opinion. I'm not sure if you do. When the Blue Bloods are struggling in college football, which the Blue Bloods are the ones with the biggest fan bases typically, things aren't as fun because those fans aren't as active and aren't participating at the level they should be. They aren't at all the games. They aren't online trolling. They aren't posting up all the videos about them to get the fan engagement. Or maybe now they do, because On3 and all these different YouTube channels and TikToks, they troll like crazy trying to get engagement whatever way they can. But my point is there's just less engagement and there's less positivity and hype around the good teams, which I don't think is good for the sport. I think you want your sport for it to be at its peak, and to be at its peak, you got to have your good teams be serviceable at the very least, not winning 6 games.
Yeah, let me let you all in on a little secret. I'm a huge Michigan fan. I love it when Ohio State wins 11 games. It's good for the sport. It's good for rivalries. Like, if Nebraska played Oklahoma, it would be boring if they were 6-6 matching up every year. It'd be fun if they were winning 10 games or 11 games and playing each other every year, like you said. And like Miami has been down forever, and it was a disappointment that they didn't reach the playoff in my mind because it's a big brand. They're exciting. They're fun. I love the idea of like Miami being good. I think you're dead on right there. And as for Mateer going to Oklahoma, I was hoping Miami would get him, or maybe like I think Ohio State may need a transfer QB, but good for him going to Oklahoma. Yeah, I think that I don't know. It sounds like the staff wants a transfer QB, and
I just assumed Julian Sayin would step in.
I hope he does, and I think he's really good. But at this point, with all their departures from the QB room, like Howard doesn't have eligibility. They're losing 2 QBs to the portal. You got to get a depth QB anyway. Why not go big? And if Sayin's the guy, he'll beat out the guy you bring in.
That's true. That's fair. Good point. I really hope, because that's another thing good for college football, is allowing these players to play and not forcing all these transfers. If Julian Sayin doesn't start and they bring in somebody else, who knows what that means for his future, and he'd probably stick around and just play his redshirt freshman year a little bit, but you still want to see the young guys get in. But
yes.
Nathan says, what do you think about Isaiah Hunter? I'm big on him. I think he'd be a good player. It's tough because he played in the ACC. He had 500-something yards receiving as a redshirt sophomore. The upside is he'd have at least 2 years at Nebraska, so that'd be positive. And he could maybe build a relationship with Dylan. So I think automatic take. He'd compete right away for a starting job. I'm not sure if he'd be receiver 1, receiver 2, or receiver 3, but he would absolutely be in the mix for one of those spots. Did you watch any of him, or have you heard anything about him?
I didn't watch anything of him, but I just pulled up his stat sheet, and while obviously you probably know more about him, way more than I do.
He's an ex-receiver. He's got good speed. He's got good hands. He's really consistent. He was young, so obviously he can develop.
He seemed to come on statistically as the season progressed. Like, he did a lot better against SMU, let's say, than Florida State earlier in the year. So I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with him. I think Nebraska has a really good chance to get him. He was taking visits to Kansas State and Nebraska, and I believe he was only following Nebraska on Instagram. I did see someone post that up. People love to check the Instagram stuff. Nathan says, who's Ole Miss's quarterback next year? His name is Austin Simmons. I watched him play when I went to the Ole Miss game against Georgia. He came in when Jackson Dart got hurt, let a touchdown drive out the gate. The offense was humming. The dude's fast. I think he's going to be a stud, so I'm assuming that he'll be the starter next year as a sophomore, and they won't go to the portal. They won't need to. He was a good quarterback. Let's see here. Judy, thanks for being a member, and thank you for being here. She says, we're not going to get a bunch of 4- and 5-star talent until we can showcase their talent and stop the coaching merry-go-round. It's a great point. Once we have a little bit more consistency, maybe people will come here. Let's see. Nathan, another question from Nathan. He says, how many yards would Genty have gotten on Nebraska? I'll let you answer that first.
You don't want to know the answer. Well, it also depends on which version of the D-line shows up.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell you the truth, Sam, because I think you're overlooking something. Nebraska went against 2 of the best rushing teams in the country and absolutely shut those rush attacks down. Right? Ohio State and Iowa.
Well, Iowa, yes. Ohio State, Ohio State's O-line without Simmons was a paper tiger, but Nebraska I give absolute credit for. I just think Ginty, you know what? I'll compromise.
How much better?
I
Okay,
think he
wait. How much better is Ashton Genty than Caleb Johnson?
I think he's a little bit better, but not like it's not like Ginty is like 10 times better than Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson's one of the best running backs in the country. So I'd say probably just because Matt O'Madsen's a better QB than whoever Iowa had, I'd say probably like at least 100 yards, but that could mean 3.9 yards per carry, which would be pretty good.
Yeah. I think that they would have held him to 100 yards. I don't think he would have gone off. I think it would have been a very similar situation to the Iowa game. I think Nebraska's defense would have held strong. It would have obviously opened up opportunity in the pass game for Maddox Madsen, but I don't think that Boise has that dynamic of an offense where they're going to be able to light Nebraska up anyway. So it would have been a situation where they could have stacked the box and likely shut him down to some degree. I really thought they did a great job with Caleb Johnson against Iowa. There was that one freaking play, but they were dominant against him. That's why that game was so hard to react to, because I was like, man, Nebraska kicked their ass all day. They shut that offense down. They didn't let them run on them, and they still found a way to win it. It was frustrating, but it is what it is. Bill says, how many points do you think Nebraska puts up in the bowl game against Boston College? I'm going to save my predictions for that game for my video this week, but what do you think?
I will lean toward. I haven't even gotten that far, but I'll just say upper 20s for now. Could change when I make my preview video on that, though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you're going to have this entire month to work with Dana Holgerson. He'll be able to implement some new ideas. I'm optimistic. I don't know if it's a high-scoring game or not. I'm hoping they score, because if they don't, the defense is going to have to play pretty well. I know Boston College has got some offense, you know. They aren't rolling with a I mean, the quarterback was the backup at some point this season, but he's played. So they're not going against a guy who's unfamiliar with the spotlight. It'll be interesting. Brad says, how did we lose Eric Rivers to Georgia Tech? How serious are we in the portal? You know, Nebraska's serious, but Nebraska has one thing. I've said this before. I said it 2 minutes ago. They have one thing that they cannot buy. They have one thing that they cannot sell people on, which is proven recent history. Georgia Tech just took Georgia to the wire, almost beat them. Georgia Tech had a really good season, was ranked in the top 25 at one point this season. Georgia Tech, I believe, returns their running back next year. They return their quarterback next year. Georgia Tech is in position to be a contender in the ACC next season. Is Nebraska able to say the same thing right now? Unfortunately, they're not. So, yes, Nebraska has fallen down the ladder to the point where they're losing to schools like Georgia Tech, because now, with the way the money works, Georgia Tech has just as much money to spend as Nebraska does. And when you're not just looking at the money, you got to look at these other factors. And some of these players want to win. And if you want to win, you got to go where you can. So the other thing is, who knows what Eric Rivers' deal is? He at least lived in Florida when he was going to FIU. But you have the opportunity to go to school in Atlanta, or you have the opportunity to go to school in Lincoln, Nebraska. Was proximity to home a deal? Was the Atlanta, living in Atlanta is a totally different lifestyle. Was that part of it? Like, I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, it is frustrating to watch, Brad. And, it does make you question what's going on, but I think it comes down to situationally for players, and then Nebraska not winning. It's tough. Nathan says, who are your top guys for receivers now that Rivers is gone? It's really Isaiah Hunter. That's my only top guy. I don't think Nebraska really... Here's the top guys right now. I mean, you've got Jonte Cook, who's the 13th best receiver in the portal, and it sounds like he could go to Colorado. You've got... All these other guys are committed. Casey Conception, he's going to Colorado, it looks like. Dane Key, looks like he's going to Georgia. Deuce Robinson just did a visit to Arizona State. No word of him coming to Nebraska. Zach Branch said do not contact, so he already knows where he's going. Probably Oregon, Bama, Michigan, something like that. So I'm just not sure that there's any hot name that you're looking at right now outside of Isaiah Hunter, who's a top 20. Isaiah Hunter, according to 24/7 Sports, is the 20th best receiver in the portal. So maybe you get him. J. Michael Sturdivant, he's from UCLA. He's in the portal. He was a good receiver. He had a really good season last year. I'm not sure how well he did this year, but yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. What do you think, Sam? Does Nebraska just have to wait? Do they got to wait until some more names pop in? Because we're not done yet. That guy from Wisconsin was it Will Pauling?
Yep.
Yeah, Will Pauling just entered, so there's other guys who will pop in, but some of the ones they're pursuing right now, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that you got to wait a little bit. There's probably more. There's definitely more commits coming, more incoming players for Nebraska. That has to be the case if they want to build depth.
Yeah, they're going to.
But more importantly, it's the staff. The staff has to win with, they have to win with what they have. They have to develop what they've had for a year or more, and they have to win games that can be won within reason, of course. That's, I think, the more important thing. Like, it's like what you said. If they can win, if they can break out, and at the same time spur on more investment, which winning will probably help in that case because Nebraska hasn't won at a high level in a long time.
Yep.
Then I think you can contend. It's like climbing the ladder. You can't go from you can't go from the bottom step to step 20 at once unless you have a jetpack,
Right.
like a billionaire. Nebraska doesn't have a jetpack. And even then, I don't know if you want that because mindlessly spending in the portal creates, I think, its own issues. So I just think there has to be patience. I know the season, the worst thing about the season was it started off hot and then it ended very cold. That's always the worst. So I just think there has to be some perspective. Doesn't mean you can't have concerns because I have my concerns, but it's only December. It's not even the end of December yet. Like, they're going to get more guys. They will.
They will. It's just no one knows who they're going to be. Another portal commitment right now, not for Nebraska, but for Missouri, is Ahmad Hardy, who is the true freshman All-American from Louisiana Monroe. And he'll be going to Mizzou. So that's a target off Nebraska fans' list they can check off. Brandon, thank you for the $20 super chat. He says, Genty put up 200 against Oregon. Shitty competition, I guess. 2, hard underselling Winery. He would have been the hottest player in the portal if he didn't pre-commit to NU. You read too much of Ms. X posts. I don't read any Missouri posts. Oh, you're saying Mrs. Missouri. Yeah, okay. So he's saying Genty put up 200 against Oregon. Shitty competition, I guess. You pointing out one game and saying that every single team that he played against wasn't terrible competition, that really doesn't, that's not a good argument to what I said. He played shitty competition a majority of the season. He played a good team in Oregon, or great team in Oregon, an elite team, the best team in the country in Oregon, whatever you want to say. He played a decent team in Oregon State. He played a bad team in XYZ. I already looked at their schedule. He didn't play good competition. He played one game. That's my opinion. Now, I get it. Everyone has their own opinion. I'm just telling you mine. The next thing is hard underselling of Winery. Would have been the hottest player in the portal if he didn't pre-commit to NU. Yeah, I think you're probably right that he would have been a hotter player if he didn't pre-commit, but he hasn't proven anything. And I'm not saying he won't be good at Nebraska. That's not my intention. I'm not trying to undersell him and tell you, don't get excited. He was great, like a great addition, all that. I'm just saying when Nebraska went and lost the players they did, you're hoping you're going to get immediate return, right? You need to get transfer players who can come in and impact the game the way those players did. So you have to replace James Williams' sack count. You have to replace all those snaps between Princewill that Princewill would have had and that Jamari Butler would have had. So is Winery good enough right now today to do that? We don't know. And I don't want to be the one who sits here and tells you this is a great addition and he's going to be a stud player because I don't know that to be true, right? So I'm not trying to undersell him because I'm a hater of Nebraska, as you know. I mean, Brandon, you know damn well I'm not sitting here trying to hate on Nebraska or be negative because I'm here selling hype all season long and in the preseason, even in the offseason. But I am trying to be realistic with it. I'm trying to say, look, how realistic is it that when Neri comes in and makes an impact day one? Well, he didn't do very much in his first season at Missouri. Yes, he redshirted, but you hear things like whatever it was, that he wasn't a cultural fit or anything of the stuff they say online. It's like, okay, well, if there is any hint of truth to that, then he's going to have to come to Nebraska and he's going to have to work whatever those things are out to make sure he does get on the field right away. So I'm just looking at it from a replacement standpoint. He is a huge add. I'm sure Nebraska's going to do great with him and he'll be successful here. I just don't want to sit here and act like this is Nebraska's next starting defensive end who's going to go out and be as dominant as whoever they had in place for him before, because I don't know that to be true. What do you think, Sam? Is that a fair take?
I think that's extremely fair because yes, he was rated highly out of high school, and often that does correlate. Recruiting rankings aren't a total facade, and they're more true than not, but they also don't hit completely. So he comes in and he has very high upside, and I liked the fact that Nebraska got him, but we don't know if he's going to have the same immediate impact as the two starting DN/edge players, like what Jamari Butler and MJ Sherman. They were correct.
The three they lost were Jamari Butler, James Williams, and Prince Will. Those are the three main guys.
Prince Will. MJ Sherman was
MJ
like
Sherman's
what, edge
graduating.
linebacker.
He's no. I mean, Prince Will and MJ play the exact same position, but I was just saying in those three guys they lose because those guys all play up on the line. Those are the ones that I'm thinking about Nebraska having to replace.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We don't know if he'll. That's very fair because we don't know if he'll provide the production that those players did.
Right. So Brandon. Thank you for the $20 super chat. Thank you for bringing this up because I think this is a great thing to talk about. So I appreciate your comment. But I'm not sitting on Twitter reading a bunch of Missouri hate and reading a bunch of posts from them and saying, "Oh well, he must suck," because I didn't look at that. I didn't look at that as a let down commitment or someone who's average. I just, I'm trying to be realistic is all. Let's see. Ease says Haynes King is gone after the bowl game. I don't know about that. I think Haynes King goes back if they're going to recruit more good players for him, Jackal says maybe we might have missed Garrett McGuire for recruiting because he's over at Texas Tech. I don't think McGuire's the reason they're having all that portal success. Nathan, thoughts on Isaiah World? Well, I thought it was okay. So do you know who Isaiah World is?
Yes, and Nebraska, that would be a huge get.
So
huge get.
Today, the Texas Tech offensive tackle, I believe he was like the top offensive tackle in the portal. He committed to Oregon. Isaiah World's top three were Texas Tech, Nebraska, and Oregon. I, being a overly optimistic fan who loves to drink Kool-Aid, right away said, you know what? Oregon got their tackle, which means it's now going to be down to Nebraska and A&M because that tackle's not going to want to go and play at Oregon where they're going to be extremely deep. He'll want to come to a place like Nebraska where he can start right away. So that's the Kool-Aid drinker in me. Sam, what do you think? Does that commitment mean anything? Does it mean that Oregon's just good for offensive linemen and he's going to want to go there too?
It depends on a lot of things. I mean, I think that, Texas, what do you said? Isaiah World's finalists are Texas Tech, Nebraska,
Texas A&M,
Oregon.
Texas A&M, Nebraska, A&M. Oregon.
Well, Oregon is an O-line factory, but Nebraska he'll start immediately at Nebraska because of their losses and the offensive line play they have.
Yep.
And A&M I'd say is more so for money and also playing time because Oregon's O-line is deep. They develop there. I think there's a reasonable chance. I mean, you're in his top three. I think there's a very good chance you can get him because if he's interested in Nebraska, and like you said, Nebraska, it's not like they're handing out 10 or 20 million NIL checks. He must see something. So I think it's rightful to see optimism. I would just guess Oregon at this point because Oregon, you have the money, you have the championship prestige, and they can develop. But if not Oregon, I'd probably then say Nebraska, I guess.
I hope you're right. You're feeding me Kool-Aid. You're trying to get me hyped up. And I'll let you do it. There was another offensive tackle. I don't know how to say his name, so I'm not going to butcher it. He was the starter at Washington State for the last, I think they said 3 years. And he's already on a visit to Nebraska. So if they can get either Isaiah World or the guy from Washington State, that'd be an absolute home run. I would be shocked if they were able to land one of those two. But if they did, I would be ecstatic. So we'll see how that goes. Sarah says, thoughts on Harberg being a tight end? I was told back in like September by someone that Harberg was getting looked at as a tight end by NFL scouts, and that there was no question he was going to have to change positions next season. So since the beginning of this year, I've been thinking, yeah, Harburg's going to change positions since the beginning of the season. And as soon as it happened, I got texts from some people who, again, close to the situation, and they said, yeah, he's in the tight end room now for the bowl game. And I actually told a few people that I was like, Harburg's not going to be playing quarterback for the bowl game. He's going to switch positions. And then the guy was like, no, that doesn't make any sense because they're not going to roll with Graham's stat as quarterback because da da da. And I was like, no, trust me, it's going to be Harburg. And then obviously Rule announced that was true. I think it's an amazing fit. I think his athleticism needs to be utilized. Nebraska doesn't have enough speed on the field at all the time or at all times, and it would be great to see him out there, a big body who obviously has good enough hands to go out there and make an impact in a way that we saw him do in 2023. We just weren't rewarded for it because they needed a really good passing quarterback, and he just couldn't get it done with his arm. So, what do you think?
I think it's amazing because now you can utilize him as a receiving threat, and you can still, if you want to, line him up in wildcat and have him try and pass or run out of that formation. It allows a lot more creativity. I think Holgorsen will enjoy having such a weapon at tight end.
Yeah, I think he'll be utilized by Holgorsen. Holgorsen likes speed. Bot says, just joined. Any news on getting one of those 5-star wide receivers in the portal? We've been talking about it, Bots, and I'm of the belief Nebraska's not landing a portal receiver that fans talk about. Like, fans talk about Dane Key. They talked about Eric Rivers. They talked about Deuce Robinson, Zach Branch. Nebraska's not in position to land one of those guys, unfortunately. Nebraska's in the last place when it comes to schools that players desire to play at right now. So my guess is Nebraska's going to land a top 20 portal receiver right now, like in the next week or week and a half, hopefully. And then when we get into January, when the next wave of transfers enter the portal and these other schools have already made their picks, like Auburn got their guy, LSU got their guy, Miami got their guy, Michigan, whoever gets their first pick, then Nebraska can come to the table and say, okay, cool, now we can get a good player. Now, I'm not saying Nebraska won't get a superstar receiver from the portal. Superstar is a strong word, but I'm not saying they won't get a really good receiver from the portal because I do think there's a really good chance they will. After these bowl games happen, you're going to see a bunch of players from all over the country hit the portal, right? So wait until after bowl season to get a star, and I think Nebraska might be waiting for that because they've only targeted a few. They've only had, at least that we know about, they've only had a few receiver visitors, and they're probably waiting for the next wave. But who knows? Who knows? Steve, before I read your question, Judy, Steve says he's concerned about our NIL collective. We're losing recruits to an academic school. I'm starting to think our NIL isn't as good as we think. I think that Nebraska is paying just as much as everyone else is. I don't think money's an issue. I don't think Nebraska is going to go out and buy a roster the same way that Ohio State did last season. But I do think Nebraska's in a really good position financially, and they can afford to go toe-to-toe for some of the best players in the country.
Can I interject and also answer Steve's question?
Yep.
Georgia Tech has had one of the best offensive lines in the country this year, and it was also pretty good last year. Their defense was just awful. That's why they went 6-6. So they can spend on wide receivers because they've done a good job recruiting and developing in the portal. Nebraska, you just mentioned how a great offensive tackle from Wazoo and an awesome offensive tackle from Nevada are on visits. Meanwhile, we don't, were the receivers on visits or were they just getting looked at?
Yeah.
That's okay. Point. So I think Rule, and this is me being optimistic, but I think he's looking at his recruiting classes. I think he's a better team manager and roster manager than necessarily game time decision maker. I think he's probably trying to invest in the O-line before the receiver core, which, if that hypothesis of mine is correct, is a move that I love. I think that's what he should be doing.
I hope it is, and I like it. Well, speaking of other 5-star receivers, this just popped up on my screen. You see what that says?
Ooh.
Caleb Odom. That's another one Nebraska fans wanted. Unfortunately, Caleb Odom won't be coming to Nebraska. They never even targeted him, so it wasn't like it was a thought in my head, but he'll be going to Ole Miss. Ole Miss out here wreaking havoc in the portal once again. I love Lane Kiffin. Let me tell you, outside of Matt Rule, I love Lane Kiffin. Judy, thank you for the $2 super chat. Thank you to everyone who sent me super chats today, by the way. I can't remember if I say thank you for them or not. I read through them so quickly, but thank you if you sent a super chat or participated at all in the channel. She says, rules about building, he better get after it. I think he's doing a good job, Judy. What do you think? And what do you think, Sam? He's going hard in terms of coaching, right? He's been hiring some really good coaches.
I think that he's doing. I think overall it's still a net positive. I mean, what he's doing recruiting wise, and hiring wise, I think is better than anything Frost ever did, better than anything Riley ever did. I mean, I'm ecstatic about Holgerson. I said in my video it's an A+ hire. I think that some of the defensive position coaching hires are really good. I'm a little bit skeptical about Butler, and I also don't like Foley returning, but I'm just a guy talking about this. I think I'm pretty knowledgeable, but I'm not an insider, nor am I a coach. So I think he's doing pretty well. I mean, I'm kind of in more of a let's wait and see rather than me drinking the Roulade. But I also don't think Nebraska's just, I don't think they're trending down at all. I don't
I
think
don't.
so.
I don't want to use that word trending down. I think that's unfair. I think that they're building back and they're on pace for, success in year three. It's just been
Yes.
really hard to watch as a Nebraska fan, especially in the new era of college football, when you get familiar with these players and you feel like, well, rules building from high school and then they lose a bunch of them and they have to make coaching transition or coaching changes early. It's just, it's hard to watch. So, um, yeah, I just checked, by the way. Dane Key is set for his visit on Friday. And then I think they said that Hunter was coming in this week at some point. So Dane Key, I have said I don't think that he's going to go to Nebraska. But part of the reason that maybe he's not trending towards Nebraska right now is because he hasn't come on the visit yet. So there's a chance that Nebraska could still get him. So I'm sure that they're going to push really hard for him. And I'm not going to say that they're out of the race yet since he still hasn't come on his visit yet, which is, positive.
Good news.
Yeah, good news. Let's see. Riz said, "Open the bag for Caleb Odom." He said it right before I commented on that. Um, I'm looking through some of the chat just to make sure we talk about everyone or talk about what everyone wants us to. Sam, where is Sam's base? He seems like a partial Nebraska fan as well.
My base is Nebraska, Michigan, and Ohio State fans. This year, we've gotten a little bit more Penn State fans because I've talked about Penn State more, and I've been higher on Penn State. But it's Ohio State, Michigan, and Nebraska. That's my primary base. And also, I forgot to mention Oregon. We've got a lot of Oregon love too.
Who's your favorite team to talk about outside of Michigan?
Ooh. Honestly, that is a question that is very difficult to I almost don't want to answer that question, but you know what? I will. The teams that I'm drawn to the most to talk about outside of Michigan, it's probably a tie between Ohio State and Nebraska.
Why did you start talking about Nebraska? Was there a lot going on with coaching changes? What happened? When did you get into the mix with Nebraska fans?
Well, when I started off the channel, I just talked about whatever interested me, like regardless of like views and stuff. Now I have to be like more tactical, of course, but I still try and talk about what I'm interested in. But Nebraska and all those one score losses and the fact they were a Big Ten team and they played a lot of good teams in 2021, so I talk about them a lot. I noticed that like, hey, like they're engaging and that's good. And then I thought after 2021, I was deceived by the fact that like Frost bringing in Mark Whipple and all those transfers would get him rolling. And that's kind of how I built my Nebraska base, is because I drank the Kool-Aid, as many people
it's
did.
crazy. You really experienced the deepest, darkest moment. You saw where we believed in that 2021 team so much and we were hoping for the best so bad. And then you watched the downfall in 2022. And then you've now seen the struggle. So you've really lived out a wave of emotions as a Nebraska fan. So I'm glad that you're officially one of us, Sam.
Oh, well, thank you. And it has been emotional. Obviously, Michigan fan and student, I get way more emotional and try my best
Yeah.
to contain it against like with Michigan games. But I've watched Nebraska games before and I've gotten excited or I've gotten really, really angry, whether it's like with things that have happened. So yeah, I mean, Nebraska, I think I like rooting for Nebraska. It's not like a certain schools in, let's say, the SEC where Or like Iowa last year.
Yeah.
I hated Iowa last year because it wasn't good football.
Yeah, it wasn't fun to watch. Okay, next question. Tyler says, what are your thoughts on Jalen George, the East Tennessee State defensive lineman, and what's your NFL comp for Williams Winery? I saw someone say his NFL comp was Kayvon Thibodeau, who played at Oregon and now plays on the New York Giants. I don't know if it's because of his size or his size or his versatility, but I did see that comp. My thoughts on Jalen George is that he's going to come in and he'll play a role. I'm not sure if he's going to come in and start right away. I don't know how big he is, but I think Nebraska set themselves up with a good depth piece at the very worst, someone who will be a rotator. I'm hesitant to say that Nebraska is going to be able to replace the defensive ends that they had this season with a guy who comes from the FCS and that he's going to make an impact right away, because you just don't know how he's going to translate when it comes from FCS to Big Ten. It's almost like a junior college player a little bit, but he did have some pretty high accolades. So I'm positive on his upside. I'm excited for it. I haven't done too much research into him, but that's my thought on any FCS player who comes over. It's a bit of an unknown. Nebraska, though, has had success in the FCS. They got Samari Toure and they got Brian Buschini both from the FCS. They also got a kicker a few years ago, Timmy Bleekrod from Furman. Bleekrod obviously didn't pan out as well as Buschini or Samari Toure, but they have recruited the FCS before. So we'll see. I'm not sure. Let's see. Nathan says, can we offer the big bucks on players we want, 1 million plus? Absolutely. If Nebraska gets any of the tackles that they're trying to get, World or the guy from Washington State, they will be paying over $1 million for them. Jim, thank you for the $7.90. He said, I have heard the new wide receiver coach like several present players now in the room. I hope that he can develop some of them. I'm excited to see Demetrius Bell. I'm excited to see Carter Nelson. Obviously, Ja'Cory Barney has already lit it up. Who else? Quinn Clark, people talked about him. Now you're going to have Cortez Mills in the mix. Jalen Lloyd is someone I really liked at Nebraska before this season. I'm not sure what your thoughts were on Jalen Lloyd or if you thought he was underutilized, Sam, but I think he needs to get the ball in his hands more often.
I thought that his games last year, or not last year, but 2023 showed in my view, that he was going to have a larger role in 2024 than he actually did. So I wonder, how he'll look in 2025.
Yep. I really hope that they plug him in. Kyle says, Nebraska fans need to accept we won't get anything in the portal but bottom feeders. So, Kyle, I appreciate realism, right? And I totally understand your sentiments here. But I don't think you're looking at this the right way. Nebraska fans do need to accept that right now, when they're competing against the biggest, baddest, the best teams out there, they're not going to be able to win these recruiting battles. But this is the first wave of the portal, and there will be a second wave in about 2 weeks. When that second wave comes and all of these other teams have already filled up their rosters, Nebraska will be able to go and find some of the hidden gems, or they're going to find the guys who Penn State now can't take because they already took somebody else, right? Or USC already filled their roster. So now the next guy up who's really good has to come to a place like Nebraska because he waited too long to enter the portal. Nebraska's going to get really good players. They won't just have to settle for bottom feeders. But right now, it does feel like they aren't going to be able to land some of the bigger names until they start winning games. That's just my take. They're not going to be the hot team who can attract all the transfer portal players until they win. A win over Boston College would be a good start. What do you think, Sam?
I completely agree. It also makes it difficult because Nebraska is in a position where they want to improve.
Yeah.
But because they're not in a win now mode, and also Rule wants to build this primarily through high school.
Yeah.
It's not like Nebraska is going to be at the top in not just recent success in selling coming to Nebraska, but also availability. They're not desperate in the portal like, let's say, Florida State, or I think Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a team that is
Wisconsin's
desperate.
Legit got a coach on the hot seat.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think Nebraska's going about this in a way that not everyone else is. And that's the case for a lot of different programs, but they're not They don't want to do this like Colorado
Right.
or what Wisconsin or Florida State feel like they have to do. Um, I think a win over Boston College would be good. And I think more importantly, as I said earlier, and I get so excited already because like it when 2025 rolls around, a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to be done with football." Well, I love it. So 2025 preseason content's going to be fun. Win in 2025 and do better. Maybe finish in the top 25 or stay in the top 25 for more of the year,
Hmm.
and you will reap better opportunities in that whole cycle as
Right.
well.
I like it. Josh says, do we think we get a new special teams coach after the bowl? I don't think so. I think Foley's locked in. If Foley was going to be gone, they would have gotten rid of him already. Mottzilla, thank you for being a member. He says, I still feel there is something fishy in Nebraska. I would have expected more than one of those defensive commits to move to Florida State. Well, Nebraska was tampered with pretty heavy, you know. They got tampered with for Jamari Butler. They got tampered with for, what's his name? Prince Will Uman Mielen. And it makes sense that both of those players went to schools that are on championship paths and didn't want to go to Florida State, which was more of a rebuild. So I wasn't too surprised by it. I knew James Williams was going to Florida State, but I wouldn't say there's anything fishy in Nebraska. I would just say tampering when you're going after a kid who's playing on a team that, severely underachieved and only won 6 games, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think Nebraska under Rule. I mean, this is even the case under Frost. They have and have had good players, but if those players feel like they can do better elsewhere, like let's say Wandale Robinson from a few years ago, and they have the opportunity to go, they're going to go.
Yeah.
That's how this works now, whether for better or for worse.
Max, thank you for being a member. He says Husker Online said that Key and Hunter were a higher priority than Rivers. Not sure if that's a cope or not. I don't think that's a cope. So I'm 100% certain that Key and Hunter were a higher priority than Rivers. Those two make the most sense to play X and I guess Hunter could be a Z. And then you'd have the slot as Ja'Cory Barney. But regardless, if Nebraska felt like they were good with Key, if they felt like they were good with Hunter, maybe they didn't put the pressure on Rivers and maybe they didn't really want Rivers that bad. So yeah, maybe Rivers was a loss by choice and not that he picked Georgia Tech and didn't pick Nebraska. The coaches know more than we do, right? So maybe they feel really good about where they stand with Hunter and Key. I feel really good about Hunter. I do think Nebraska's going to land him. So if they feel confident in Key, maybe they weren't too worried about Rivers. Obviously, like I said before, I didn't realize that Key hadn't been on his visit yet. Key doesn't come until Friday, so I think we're going to learn a lot more on Friday. Hunter is in Nebraska right now, so we should learn more about his situation after the day. But yeah, it's totally up in the air. The transfer portal stuff, you know so little about it that it's hard to track it all and know what's going on. But I'm optimistic. If Husker Online says that Key and Hunter are the priority targets, then I'm sure Nebraska has something up their sleeve, and maybe those are the two Nebraska lands. So I'm hoping for the best. Ole Miss took 4 receivers from the portal. That's what happens when you're winning and play good offense. Receivers want to come play for you. Let's see. We've talked about a lot today. I'm happy you're here, Sam. It's more fun to do this with you, even though I had all the technical difficulties to start.
Yeah, I mean it, and no problem about the technical difficulties either. It's
Hey,
all
no
good. This has
problem
been
for
very
you.
fun.
No problem for you. Problem for the chat. They were losing their minds. They were like, Connor, what the hell are you doing neglecting us? Evan, thank you for being a member for 2 years. I appreciate the $10 super chat. He says, just hopped in. Have you guys talked about the playoff games this weekend yet? I like Indiana and Ohio State to move on, and I have a feeling SMU will upset Penn State, and I don't know why. What about you? We'll go through each one. We'll talk about all of the bowl games. So let me pull these up. I took James Madison to win today over Western Kentucky. I took them money line. They're up 7 with 2 minutes left. So I feel pretty good about that. They're about to score another touchdown. So likely cover the spread too. Okay, so we'll start with Indiana Notre Dame. Indiana +7 on the road at Notre Dame. I'm taking Notre Dame to win by 3. What are you thinking?
I'm picking Indiana to win by 6.
Wow, okay. Penn State, SMU. I think Penn State's going to roll. I don't think SMU has the firepower, and I think Penn State will win this game by 14.
I think that I picked Penn State to win by 17. To answer Evanception's, I don't know why, it's James Franklin. If Penn State had any other coach who was at least ranked like top 10 nationally with this roster, I think they probably win it all. I think their roster's that good. It's just James Franklin in big games can't get it done.
That's
Can't
part
do
of the
it.
reason I was hesitant to take Penn State, but SMU is bad. And like, if it would have been Tennessee at Penn State, I'm taking Tennessee all day. A
Yeah,
team who's more
I get that.
competent, a team who's been there before, a team who has had more recent success. SMU's, new to the party, kind of like a Cincinnati playing Alabama a couple years ago. It's just not the same level of talent, and Penn State's getting off easy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's on the road too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like Penn State traveling to SMU. It's
Right.
whiteout against
Right.
superior competition.
Right. Okay. Tennessee, Ohio State. I'm taking Ohio State to win by 3.
I'm taking Ohio State by 14. I think they have major matchup advantages that if they take advantage of them, and I think they will, because their problems with Michigan, I think they'll beat Tennessee handily.
It's fair. Tennessee doesn't have the quarterback edge in this game. Ohio State's definitely a more complete team, I think. Tennessee's just really good at running the ball. A few more games I wanted to talk about and get your take on. I think Texas A&M rolls USC.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, I think Nebraska beats Boston College, and I think they beat them pretty good. I think Nebraska beats them by at least a touchdown. I think that's a bold prediction, and I'm biased, obviously, but I think Nebraska is going to come into this game with some positive energy, having worked with Holgerson, and the offense is going to come out and score points.
I'll default to your position.
What
I do think they'll win.
What do you think about Iowa and Missouri? Missouri's a 3-point favorite. They don't have Luther Burden. Iowa doesn't have Caleb Johnson.
Is Brennan Sullivan healthy?
Yes.
Because okay, well then I would take Iowa. I assume a lot of Iowa's O-line will probably play. They'll still be able to run the ball pretty well. I would probably take Iowa there. I mean, if they don't
Yeah.
have Luther Burden, and Missouri has been a team where you win 9 games,
Mhm.
but all 3 of your losses are humiliating in each of their own ways. You just won 9 games because your schedule's easy.
Right.
Iowa should win that game.
Okay, I'll take Iowa. Louisville plays Washington. I think both schools are playing their backup quarterbacks. Right now, Louisville's a 2.5-point favorite. I don't really like Washington this year. I don't think they're that great. But I kind of like them to beat Louisville.
I'm gonna go with it depend. I mean, just the opt-outs make this so hard, but I'm just gonna side with Louisville.
Okay. Yeah, the opt-outs do make it really tough. South Carolina's playing Illinois. Illinois is a 9.5-point dog. I think Illinois could win outright. South Carolina's going to have a lot of guys sitting. Obviously, their running back's not going to play. They've got a few guys on defense who I think hit the portal. And then they've got guys who are going to get drafted who aren't going to play. So yeah, I think Illinois has their quarterback coming back. It should be a good game. This shouldn't be a 9-10 point win for South Carolina. I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive than that. Although I do think South Carolina is one of the better teams in the country.
Yeah, I intuitively have to pick South Carolina to win, but I'm gonna make a preview on this game. But I do think Illinois will cover. It's just Illinois' mediocre O-line against one of the best D lines in the nation that's young enough to where they're not going to opt out.
Right.
Like Dylan Stewart against Illinois' tackles, they'll have to find a way to negate that. Illinois will.
The last one, Minnesota plays Virginia Tech. I know Virginia Tech's quarterback's playing, but I did see Virginia Tech had some opt-outs. I kind of like Minnesota to cover.
I'd agree with you. Row the boat.
Minnesota's been playing pretty well.
Yeah, Fleck always treats the bowl games seriously.
Yeah, Minnesota usually does play good in the bowl game now that you say it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nathan says, what's the most a player would make in the transfer portal? Whatever a school is willing to pay him. And the market's really screwed up for that one reason alone. They could make, right now, They paid a player $12 million to go to Michigan, right? So who knows what they would pay a guy in the portal who's already proven. I know
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola would get millions of dollars if he was to sign with another team. Tyler says, who will be leading receivers for the team next year? I think that's a no-brainer right now. You'd have to say Ja'Cory Barney because of his existing relationship with Dylan and his familiarity with the offense. How many seniors will opt out of the bowl game? Right now, I don't think you're going to see any. I mean, you might see one, but right now I don't think any. No one except for Ty Robinson would have a reason to, but even Ty right now looks like a third or fourth round draft pick. Yeah, I think Ty plays, so probably no one. Will the young guys play over the seniors? Example, Carter Nelson and Lloyd play over Nair and Banks. No, I don't think so. Nebraska wants to win the bowl game, so they're going to play whoever it is that they have to win. I think they'll all play, though. I think Carter Nelson will get some time. I think Jalen will get some time. I think that you'll see a healthy rotation is the best way to put it. Sarah, thank you for the $2 super chat. Thank you for being a member. All fans give $1 each, couple extra a year, LMAO. Yeah, if every Nebraska fan could commit and said, we're going to all donate $1 or $2 each, could you imagine how much NIL money there'd be? Someone needs to set that out. Someone needs to rally the troops. I'd be a good one to do it. I just don't know enough Nebraska fans. I know a few, but not enough of them. Brett, thanks for the $5 super chat. What are both of your thoughts on the impacts of higher and higher pay just continuing to go higher all the time for players in college? What do you think?
It will ruin locker rooms and also player-coach relations. That's what I think.
Why player coach?
Because the players, the inflation of paying players will more rapidly increase than the inflation of coaching salaries. So eventually,
sheesh. Didn't even think about that.
Yes, that's that. If this is allowed to go on for a very long time, that is what will happen. It will become exactly like the NFL, where like Mahomes makes more than Andy Reid, except these players aren't developed like NFL players are. So the quality of football will also decrease if this is allowed. It'll have a lot of negative effects.
Let's go back to what you said about the locker room. It'll really be weird being a football player when you're, a normal guy. I'm trying to think of a normal player in Nebraska, like your average guy. I don't even know one off the top of my head, but
like Turner Corcoran.
Turner Corcoran. Great. Thank you for a name. So you've got Turner Corcoran, who, let's say, I don't know what he's making, but let's say he's making $50,000 to play at Nebraska as a starting left tackle, or $100,000 or whatever it is. And you've got your quarterback who is making, let's say they've got to go and spend big for one after Dylan's gone, and you're paying a quarterback $2 million. That discrepancy is significant. And if you have that going on at every single position, and you have certain guys making, life-changing money, and then you have other guys making the vet minimum, it's going to be awkward, and it'll be a little funny. And I think it already is. I don't know how much so, but I do know that some players are counteracting that by helping other players on the team. Travis Hunter, okay, I go back to Travis Hunter. I have a lot of respect for him, and I really, really like Travis Hunter, okay? I think he's awesome. His personality, he's such a nice guy, like a lot of positives with that dude. But
yeah, he's a great person.
Travis Hunter took part of his NIL money to support other players on the team. I think there was a player at Nebraska who was spending money to buy other players furniture for their apartments and stuff. So there are players who are trying to counteract that. But realistically, it just makes sense to put a salary cap in place, put minimums in place, maximums obviously. And then if you have that, you won't have this insane discrepancy, and you won't have that weird culture in the locker room, and you won't have that shift like you talked about with the coaches and the players, when the quarterback's making NFL money and his position coach makes $400,000 a year. So that's my thought. We're in a tough spot. Not Nebraska. College football needs to get their shit together.
Yes. Otherwise they'll lose their base.
100%. Pete says, listen to Coach Prime's interview. He was so far ahead of the curve, and now everyone is doing what he was, and he's vilified for it. Yeah, he was far ahead of it. I think it's awesome that Prime's whole situation worked out. I'm not a Deion hater. I was a Deion supporter before he got hired at Colorado, and I kept that energy. The only time I'm a Deion hater is like when it comes to the rivalry with Nebraska and playing them. But in general, I really appreciate his comments and his beliefs. I think Deion's spot on about a lot of stuff, and he's a really good football coach. So, yeah, he was ahead of the curve. and it worked out for Colorado, and he was able to turn a program around who won whatever one game and got them almost to the college football playoff this year. It's freaking awesome. Stu, thank you for the $10 super chat. I appreciate the support. You said, I don't think we are giving Rule enough credit for the Butler hire and how it allows us to maintain some continuity in scheme and personnel, withstanding our portal losses. You know, I think a lot of people bash that Butler hire, and you're exactly right, Stu. Butler was able to come to Nebraska, learn the scheme, learn the personnel, understand what Rule wants to do and how he's going to run things, and then fill in seamlessly after Tony White leaves. They aren't going to have to change a bunch of stuff up, and I think that's going to be massive because now you have all of these players who he doesn't have to understand or introduce to his new system. He can just be the one person who interjects and figures out how to call what he wants to call, obviously in collaboration with Rule. But I do think that was a big hire. It was great for him, and it wasn't a hire that was splash or exciting 2 weeks ago. It was a hire, in my opinion, that was exciting when it happened back in July. When you went and found this guy off the street who wasn't working, who came from the NFL, who had that Big Ten coaching experience, defensive coordinator experience specifically, and you said, you're going to be the DC in waiting, that was the home run hire. And people just, I think that effect wore off. And seeing the defensive backs regress a little bit, frustrated fans. So, yeah, they aren't giving him the credit he deserves, but I do think that was a great hire. What did you think when you first saw that, Sam? Were you excited about that, or did you think it didn't make sense?
I it wasn't an F grade or D grade of a hire. I think that would be unfair because he, was in the system and he's had prior DC experience. He's been in the NFL. But I personally didn't like it, mainly because I think that Nebraska, with all they're losing on defense, like if they want to make a scheme change, and I think 4-down D linemen's better than 3-down D linemen, especially in the Big Ten, the time to make a scheme change is now because of all the losses that are occurring.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought that maybe, missed opportunity in going for continuity over maybe changing to a scheme that I thought would be better in the Big Ten, because Jim Knowles, who's one of the best D coordinators in the country, he ran a 3-3-5 at Oklahoma State, but he moved to a 4-down system at Ohio State. I think in part because it's just a different type of game from the Big 12 and 2020, 2021 to the Big 10 right now. But I'm open to being wrong as always, and I'll eat my words if I am, or I'll just kind of say, okay, I just happen to be right if I was right.
I like it. I saw a chat in here that I wanted to pull up that made me excited. Oh, here it is. Steve says Patrick Payton entered the portal, and Philip Simpson posted a no place like Nebraska with GBR. He was also committed to play for Nebraska and then flipped to FSU. Philip Simpson was also at FSU. I didn't see that tweet, but that could be a promising sign, and it would be freaking awesome. Patrick Payton would be a massive grab for Nebraska. He's an instant impact player, but not only that, he's a draft pick. I don't know where he's slotted, but he would be a first or second round pick right now. He will be a star wherever he plays. So if he comes to Nebraska, that would be a huge upgrade to what they lost.
Yeah.
Not only a big win, but a huge upgrade to what they lost. And so maybe all of that ties together. I don't know. I didn't see it on Twitter, but if Phil Simpson posted at the exact same time, I see why we're trying to piece it together, and I'm excited for it if it's true.
Yeah, he can win games for Nebraska on his own. That's how good of a player Patrick Payton is.
I'm excited. Man, that's exciting. Hopefully Steve's not just getting my hopes up, man. Judy, thanks for being a member. Thank you for the $2 super chat. Rule coaches them up, then year 3 they grab the NIL. That's exactly what happened. But that's what's happening all over the country, right? Nebraska's going to reap the reward as well. So hopefully they get some guys, and Judy, we can have somebody else to root for who's actually going to stay here for longer than a year. High Mountain Guy says, who got tickets for Arrowhead today? I did not, but I did decide almost certainly that I'm going to go to that game. You guys know my belief. I don't buy tickets until day of because I don't like to pay the outrageous prices that people have on there. So I'll be buying my tickets when I get to Kansas City or the day before, day of, whatever. But I think that's going to be a great trip, and it should be a great game. I love seeing Nebraska play in neutral site games, and I think it'll be fun to watch them play in an NFL stadium. So hopefully a lot of fans go out there. Would love to see Nebraska, I guess, sell out or get close to a sellout in the Chiefs Stadium away from home, you know?
That'd be awesome.
But all right, Sam. Well, we've been live for almost 2 hours. I don't want to keep you all night. I know you're in Michigan. It's a little bit later there, probably 8 p.m. I'll let you get back to your work. But thank you for coming on and answering all our questions and just having a chat. I like talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for reaching out. It was actually Connor this time who reached out to bring me on. I'll have to get you on my channel soon and also come back. Thank you all for watching and commenting, and I enjoy talking with you too, Connor. Go
Good
Big
deal.
Red.
Go Big Red, Sam. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Always appreciate having Sam on. He's a good dude, and he's got a lot of good insight, you know? Sam is a young guy who's just trying to figure out how to build his YouTube channel up. And he took a lot of risk. You know, he was going to school. I think he stopped going to school to try and build it up, and he's taking a shot. So anytime I can support him, I like to. And it would mean a lot to me if you guys went over to his channel, hit the subscribe button, or at least watch some of his videos and hit the like button. Support him the same way you support me, because, yeah, I appreciate him always coming on our channel, and I'm glad to see young guys out here hustling. Yeah, so we've got a bowl game next week, which means I've got to do a game preview. So I'm going to work on that. I guess tomorrow I'll work on it. I've got a Christmas party, you know, Christmas party season in LA. It's like back to back to back every night. So my weekend or my week schedule, I had a Christmas party last night. I have one tomorrow night. Then on Friday night, I'm going to the Cosm. You guys seen Cosm? It's like the Sphere. And when you're inside, you watch this big screen that's like a big like dome deal, and you feel like you're in the stadium. So you buy seats like $150 each, but you're in this little booth. They bring you drinks, food, and you watch the game from all of these different angles up against this Sphere deal. So I'm gonna go watch the Indiana Notre Dame game with my buddy Jacob, and then Saturday we'll get to watch the playoff games, and I'll be getting my game preview up before then. We then have Christmas, and I'll be busy for Christmas. I've got to go to my mom's in Orange County. The next day, I fly out to Oklahoma, and I'll be there from the 26th to the 3rd. Be there watching the bowl games with my dad. So, should be fun. But I'll have my mobile set up with me, so I'll be able to react to the Nebraska game and any crazy news that pops up while I'm out there. But yeah, guys, we're in the thick of portal season. Hopefully, we get some more good news soon. And I'm glad that Nebraska actually has a chance. What happened here? I think I've been live for a long time. My camera might have gotten hot. I'm just glad that Nebraska has a chance to win their bowl game, you know? There we go. But anyway, with all of that said, I'm going to see you guys in my next video. Thank you for dealing with me through the technical difficulties. Thank you again for watching all the way through once again. And I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.